Hi folks, Simon here. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to configure Serilog for logging in your Azure Functions project. So we'll jump over to Visual Studio and we've got the new project template up. Now, I have Azure Functions in my recent project templates, but if you haven't got that, you can just search for functions and you'll get the Azure Functions project template. So we'll click on Next. We'll give our function app a name. Serilog Functions. Next. Now we want to always try and select the most recent .NET version, so we'll select that. We'll stick with the timer trigger for now. We'll actually change that to 0 and then 5 asterisks, so that will run every minute. And we want to use Azurite for our runtime storage account for now. If you're not sure what Azurite is and you want more information about that, drop a comment below and I will make a video about Azurite specifically. So we'll click on Create, and that's created our default function. Okay, now if we go over and have a look at our program, we've got a very basic implementation of our host builder. We can run our Serilog functions. And it'll bring up the console and we can see we've got our timer trigger, and this will run every minute. So we'll see, if we go back to our function 1, we'll see that it just logs a information item to the log every time that runs. So we'll wait a few seconds for it to run. Okay, there we go. We can see that's now run. So our functions run and we can see the log that's come out. So we'll just stop our function app now. Now, to implement Serilog, the first thing we need to do is add some NuGet packages. So if we open up our NuGet packages, now the first thing we want to do when we start any new project is to update any of the existing packages. So we'll go to the update page, select all, click on update. This just makes sure we've got all the latest up-to-date versions of all our packages. So now if we jump back to browse and in the search box just type Serilog. Now there's a couple of different packages we need. The first one is the base Serilog package. So we can click on that, click on install and click on apply. And now the next thing we want is the serilog.extensions.logging. This allows us to integrate in with the standard logging process of .NET. We'll install that one. Now, Serilog uses a concept called syncs to output its information to various log formats. So the default one is the console. We can output to a file. We can output to application insights, to Raygun, to Seek, which is a log monitoring tool. There's about 30 or 40 different syncs that you can use. So if you do a search for Serilog syncs in Google, you'll find quite a considerable list. So by default, we will first select our serilog.syncs.console. And we'll also select serilog.syncs.file and install that. Okay, so if we close down that and we go and double click on our project, we can see now we've got our 4 NuGet packages. So to add logging, we want to go up to here after the configure functions web application, and we want to say configure logging. And create our arrow function. And now we need to create our logger that we can then integrate into the Azure Functions logging pipeline. So we want to go log. First we want to add using Serilog. There we go, got there eventually. Okay, so now we can say log, and there's a static class that we can access for Serilog called logger, and we generate a logger from that using a new logger configuration. So you can see my autofill here from my GitHub Copilot has filled that in. Now, by default, this is just generating a new logger configuration, and it's using the write to, which is how you how you tell Serilog to use one of the syncs that you've included. So it's writing to the console and then it's creating the logger. Now from there, what we want to do is we want to say logging.add_Serilog, and we want to give it our logger from above, so log.logger, and we want it to dispose, so we'll say true. Okay, so now that links our logger into the main pipeline for logging in .NET. If we run this, we won't see a lot of change. For those who are sort of a little bit eagle-eyed, we'll see that there is a bit more information being spat out in the logs, and we can talk about how to manage this a little bit later on. So as you can see, this has run the previous scheduled item at 2:01, which was just after the original process that we ran last time. So if we close that down now, we can add multiple syncs into the system. So we can just chain on other function calls. So we can add .write_to .file, and because we added the file sync, if we just tab to auto-fill that, we can see that the path that we're providing is the log.txt. Now, depending on where you're running this, you may want to fill out some information about specific paths that you might want to save it to. If you have a look at my blog post about this feature, which I'll link in the description below, I talk about how to specifically set the path if you're running this in your Azure Functions and you want to write the log file to the Azure Functions file system. And the rolling interval is how often we want a new log file to be created. So in this instance, we want it per day. So again, if we run this and wait for the next execution, okay, so that's at 12:05, and we'll close this down. If we go and look at in our Windows Explorer and go and look in our bin debug net8 folder, you'll see we have a log file. Now, because of the fact that we have included our rolling interval per day, it has prefixed the name of the file with today's date. So if I open that, we can see we've now got our log not only going to the console, but also to this text file. Okay, so there's a couple of other things. As I said before, this will start logging everything that's going through the logging pipeline. Now, in various applications, that can become a little bit chatty because there's a lot of Microsoft events, and when you start to hook up things like Azure Storage with blob storage and queues and tables and that, you start to get a lot of information coming out into your logs. So like normal logging in any .NET application, you can limit the scope of what it is doing, and it's no different for Serilog. So I'll just grab some example code that I've got on the other monitor here. And up the top here, we can add some minimum level overrides. Now, these are the ones that I typically use in Azure Functions apps that I use. I've normally sort of override the sources of Microsoft, the worker, the host, the system, the functions, and the Azure, some of the Azure namespaces, and I'll set these to either warning or error. This sort of cuts down on the amount of noise that you're getting in your events, because a lot of the information type stuff that come out of these namespaces, you don't necessarily need to be reviewing. It's more when you start getting warnings and errors that things need to be addressed. So this is the standard functions set that I use. Now, you can also set your minimum level overall that is for basically everything that doesn't fit into these specific overrides. So you might want it to log debug or information. I think the default is information, but yeah, you can, if you didn't want all the information, you could set this to warning, or I wouldn't advise setting it anything above information, but you can set it to information. The other thing that you can do is you can use enrichment. You can use enrichment with log context. Now, what this allows you to do is to add information in to basically add to the context of the log. So you can sort of do this dynamically as you use more and more features of Serilog down the track. So if you want to hear more information about how to work with the log context, let me know. The other thing I'll typically do, and this works well with tools like Seek for structured logging, I'll add an enrichment with property of type application, and then I'll give it the name of my app. So if you have a large scale system that might have some functions, an API, a web app, a Blazor app, and that sort of thing, and they're all logging to a centralized environment, say Seek, which is SEQ, look it up, by a company called Datalust, it's fantastic. Then you can have all your logs going into the one system, so all the logs for your larger system are all together, but you can then filter down for each type of application that you've got. So you can filter by events coming from the Serilog functions. So that's how you configure Serilog to use with Azure Functions. As I said, if you want to see more on any of these topics, drop a comment below, and I'd love a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Bye.